Well, it's a wonderful morning to practice. It's a nice balmy 13 degrees outside. Yeah? It's nice to be inside, sitting in the zendo in front of the fire. Yeah? A lot of times I think we want our lives to be this way, cocooned in, sitting and appreciating the wonder as it unfolds before us, the wonder of our lives, of our lived experience. I remember in my early days as a Zen teacher, I had been a marketing and sales vice president for, almost 20 years before I segued into teaching. And, not a minor change of pace, yes? But when I left the professional workforce, I had, obviously a number of staff who did all kinds of different functions, sales, IT, marketing, operations, and everybody was pigeonholed into a specific part, a specific cog in the machine, and they were able to make it run very efficiently. And I, of course, had all these vast resources at my disposal and was able to conduct it because I had a lot of practice to do it that way. And then I became a Zen teacher. And I was the marketing guy and the sales guy and the IT guy. I had all of those roles as a part of my job function all at once. And it was an interesting transition. And father, I think, was in there too. Yeah. And it was an interesting transition because now all of these tasks I saw before me, and of course I wanted to do them extremely well. And I was constantly switching gears between them. And, now my life was practice in a way, right? Or leading practice. And I suddenly found myself feeling a lot of scarcity. And I remember sitting down and looking at this huge long list of things to do and all these goals and ambitions and things I wanted to achieve in practice and I wanted my students to achieve. And I thought, I can only do what I can do. Now, I know to you that sounds like a very mundane kensho, appreciation. But all of a sudden, the bottom dropped out. And I recognized that I have to do it. Not think about doing it, not have a goal towards doing it, but actually appreciate this practice and this lived opportunity of what it is to be a teacher, to lead a practice community. And it transformed my relationship to time, and it transformed my relationship to the work that I was doing. There's a case in the Mumonkan, it's case 10. It's called Seizei the Poor. And in it, a monk Seizei eagerly asks Master Sōzan, he says, "I'm solitary and poor. I beg you, Master, please help me become prosperous." Sōzan says, "Venerable Zei." "Yes, Master," replies Zei. Sōzan says, "You've already drunk 3 cups of the finest Hakka wine, and yet you say you still have not moistened your lips." I love these cases because initially they seem very cryptic. And you may say, I don't see how this relates to the earlier story that you related. And yet they're profoundly interrelated. Seizei was a monk, but that title before his name, Venerable, is very important. Yeah? We see in this that he's also a priest. And it's common practice for priests when they enter the monastery to give up all of their possessions. They're allowed to have very little, a set of bowls, a couple changes of clothes, and that's it. Maybe a couple books, I apologize. But they frankly don't need them. Yeah? The practice itself will figure itself out. So here he is, he's given up everything for his spiritual practice. Yeah? And he left behind the attachments of the world to dedicate himself to the Dharma. And yet, in this question, we see something very striking. He carries a mindset of lack, of scarcity, of poverty. I'm solitary and poor, he says, and he begs to be made prosperous. So this deep-seated sense of insufficiency leads him to point to, or this belief, this inherent belief, that he sees himself as not enough. He sees himself as separate and alone. Notice Sōzan's response in this case. He says, he doesn't launch into a lecture, doesn't sit down and try to explain to him what's going on, or promulgate some profound Dharma. Instead, he calls out, "Venerable Sei!" Seizei responds immediately, "Yes, Master?" And in that moment, Seizei is present. He's alive and awake to Sōzan's call. He's fully engaged in the response. That's it. He's actualized perfectly by what's present. But of course, he doesn't stop the dialogue there. Sōzan continues, "Now, you've already drunk 3 cups of the finest Hakka wine, and yet you're sitting here carrying on and saying you haven't moistened your lips. What is that fine wine?" I love how it's compared. It's not compared to some sumptuous dessert. It's compared to fine wine, right? That's even more refined. So complex on the palate. Includes so much. And what does he mean that Seizei hasn't noticed it? There's a paradox that emerges in spiritual practice. In one sense, Seizei had given up everything to walk the path. Yet his attachment to his practice and his lack blinds him to the abundance of life that's already present. When we cling to our idea of practice, and when I say practice, you can interchange life. Our life, they aren't different. Our practice is our life. When we focus on it as a means to achieve something, whether enlightenment, prosperity, or even relief from our own sense of lack, we're like someone who drinks the finest wine and yet insists their lips are dry. Let's pause and reflect on Sōzan's words. In that gap between Venerable Sei and Seizei's response, we see nothing. Nothing is exchanged. Nothing is added. Nothing is removed. Yet within that nothing, the universe has already dispensed 3 cups of the finest wine. In that short place, time itself is transformed here. And we realize that time, and by this I mean the concept of time we cling to, is relative. When we're in this place of scarcity and lack, our lives move too fast because we're not open to and appreciating the wonder and resources of the moment. But when we actually stop and appreciate that gap, the alchemy takes hold. And the situation is transformed. When we see time in its true state, we recognize how malleable and how boundless it is. Now our lives are here. They're precise. They're on the spot. And there's not this constant rushing around. Ironically, if you're looking at this from the outside, it appears that that person has boundless energy. Things are moving so fast for them, witnessing it. But when you're in this place within, you recognize that you have all the resources, particularly the time, required to manifest your practice intention, to manifest your vow. Now, this is something you have to experience. I'm telling you about it, but you actually have to walk into that gap, into that moment. And this is the heart of the koan. The wine is already here. It's not something earned or acquired. It's the boundless gift of the universe itself. But as long as you approach life with a goal-centered, self-aggrandizing mindset, thinking about what you lack, what you need, what has to be done, what we hope to achieve, it's missed. It's like searching desperately for water while standing knee-deep in a flowing river. So what does it mean to become prosperous? True prosperity is not found in achieving some goal or fulfilling some imagined deficiency. True prosperity arises when we stop grasping for more and we start living by vow, by intention. When we let go of the small self's endless striving and open ourselves to the vastness of the universe and to the imperative that's present in this moment. I say it often, but this isn't a dress rehearsal. Yeah? When you walk by someone who's struggling and suffering, yeah, the stage doesn't set again and doesn't repeat itself. That's your opportunity to step into that boundless gap and to manifest as the abundance. Living by vow means aligning our intentions with the alleviation of suffering. You can't do that from a place of lack. You have to recognize, you have to step into the stream of abundance that's overflowing and that's always here. You're perfectly renewed with every step. When you allow it to flow in this way, and when you step into the river, time becomes meaningless in that sense, from a conceptual ideal. And you have an abundance of everything you need to be the medicine. In this shift from goal-based thinking to living with intention, we think that we've just made an ideological step, but we haven't. We've stepped into the profundity of the Dharma itself. When we live by vow, every step we take is whole, complete, fully infused with the meaning of the entire universe. Nothing is lacking. Every Dharma gate is present. In the words of this case, when we move from this place, we can never take a false step. Seizei's poverty wasn't a lack of material resources. It was his attachment to the idea that he was missing something, that he was solitary, that he was separate, that he was incomplete, that his life had moved too fast, and now he'd found himself drowning in the current. Sōzan's words cut through this delusion, pointing Seizei, pointing each one of us to the truth. The wine is right here for the tasting. All that remains for you is to recognize its subtle savor on your lips. Yeah. So notice this week and step into your deeply held beliefs. Yeah. We say we don't have time to practice. Like I said earlier, it's ironic because you can, those words, practice and life. I don't have time to life. I don't have time to be here for this. Yeah? And then you wonder why your life is chaotic and tumultuous. Because we're clinging to some idea of what it is. Ideas inherently only manifest themselves through contradiction. Yeah? For you to be a you, there has to be an I. If there's a Hoen, right, then there's a Sensei. But it's not, once we step into that world of ideas, we're swept away on the current of good, bad, right, wrong. But when you step into the gap and you just appreciate what's right in front of you, then you're always at home. Yeah. Free from the cycle of birth and death, from judgments, from conjectures and refutations. We live our lives in a way where we can savor every drop. Thank you for being here this morning. Wonderful to practice with all of you. Stay warm.